Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today for Coaching Excellence, creating a coaching culture in your organization. My name is Kirk Fox, and I'm very excited to be with you today. I've been in the training and development profession for over 25 years, and I'm also a certified executive coach. I've worked in various sectors such as airline, financial, healthcare, publishing, just to name a few. And right now my focus is on leadership development programs and coaching business leaders and their teams. With me today is Lauren Connor. She's our marketing specialist. And if you have any technical issues today on the webinar, just ask Lauren. Simply type your question into the question box. So let me tell you, on the note of the question box, let me just explain the panel for those of you that have never used this software before. You can click on the orange arrow if you want to hide the control panel. You can click on the blue square if you want to make it more of a full screen view. And you can click either the raise hand or just type into the question field if you have a question or a comment for us. And we will be asking you a few questions as we go through the webinar today, just to get an idea where you're at and what some of your thoughts are. Whenever you see the three dots, it will be time to jump in and answer a question. And on that note, I'd like to start by getting an idea of who's on our call today. I see there are people from all over the world that had registered for this, and we're coming to you today from cold and snowy Toronto, Canada. So I'd like to get an idea who's on our call with our first poll question. So please select the choice that best describes the main focus of your work. Okay, we're just watching to see the percentage of voting. We're about halfway there. Okay, make your choice, and we're going to close that poll in just a second. All right. So Lauren, if you want to go ahead and close that, I think we're almost, everyone has made a choice there pretty much. So we've got a bit of a variety, and as I suspected, a lot of people in the learning and development area. I know I kept this pretty general because I just wanted an idea. About 30% of you focus on coaching, some from HR, some are consultants, and then about 30% other. Okay, great. So that gives me an idea of where your focus is, and I know that with that kind of work that you do, you'll be able to share some of your insights in what I'm going to talk to you about today. All right, I used the word creating in my title originally, creating a coaching culture, and the more I thought about it, the word growing actually resonated more with me. And not just because I love gardening, but it was a perfect metaphor for growing a coaching culture. While you can't grow a thriving garden overnight, you also can't transform your culture overnight. Obviously, it takes significant pre-planning of what and where to plant the new seeds or the way of being. It takes a lot of hard work and focus to cultivate new skills and mindsets, and it takes a lot of dedication for it to flourish and sustain itself going forward. So, poll question number 2 right off the bat. I'd like to get an idea of where you're at today with coaching in your organization. So Lauren is posting the second polling question. Please select the choice that describes your organization right now. So for example, you might say we already have a thriving coaching culture, or we're partway through, we're cultivating our coaching culture. We're just starting to plant the seeds and get it going, or we're at the very beginning looking for ideas, or maybe you're not even sure what coaching is. So please make your choice now. Okay, about 75%. Great stuff. Almost everybody has voted. Last chance. All right, why don't we go ahead and close it. So about half of you are growing your coaching culture. That is so amazing to hear. We've got a few people that feel their culture is thriving, about 21% just starting, and a few of you at the very beginning, and I see a couple of you don't know what coaching is, so great. Well, that tells me that you already have a lot of ideas what this is all about. So hopefully you'll learn something today, but maybe when we ask some of the questions, you'll be able to share some of your experience as well. That would be awesome. All right, so here's the agenda for the rest of our time together this afternoon. I've structured my agenda like a timeline within the 3 phases of planting, cultivating, and sustaining a coaching culture. This is not necessarily a linear process. All components are essential, they overlap, and they're woven into the process. So I'm first going to touch on planting the seeds, which is all about communication about the program and the leadership commitment in both sponsorship and participation. I'll then talk about cultivating the garden, cultivating the coaching. And this is really about the coaching relationship and coaching fundamentals, really the core of the program. And I'm going to dig in a little deeper with these, and I want you to share your thoughts with a few questions when we get there. And then how do we sustain this? Well, we do this first by making sure it's not an event. And I want to share some ideas on what we've done, and also then how do we determine a return on our expectations around the program. So I'm going to wrap up with some recommendations based on what I've seen and share a little bit of the impact that we've had with our program. So I want you to consider this question. You're not going to answer it at this point. I want you to just think about this as we go through the webinar. Consider that your leaders have now successfully embraced coaching skills. So we're looking down the road, or for those of you that already have a thriving coaching culture, you can probably share with what you're observing now. But your leaders have successfully embraced this and their direct reports. So congratulations for all the hard work you've done to get there. What is the positive impact of this change for you and your organization? So don't answer that now, just think about it, keep it in the back of your mind, and I want to circle back to this at the end of our time together and ask again. Okay, so before I dive into my recommendations on what to do, it may be helpful for you to understand what brought me to this place, where I'm expounding the virtues of a coaching culture. I suspect my story may resonate with some of you already, especially those that are in learning and development and coaching. So the journey began for me quite a few years ago when I was the director of learning and development for a large publishing company. I had two key responsibilities, and these were also near and dear to my CEO. The first one was the annual employee engagement survey. I was responsible for administering it, analyzing the results, and strategizing with senior leadership to create a plan of action. The other thing that was one of my main responsibilities was our online performance management process. So I was to train and administer this across the organization. And for many years, I was really a champion of these two processes. You know, I really believed and still do that leaders need to understand the voice of the people to make positive changes. I also believe that performance management was an opportunity to have real conversation about performance and development. But as time went on and through much feedback and observation, I just couldn't escape it. Performance management sucked. Not only what I was observing, but more and more studies are coming to the same conclusion, that traditional performance management processes are not delivering better performance results, and in particular, they're not engaging and motivating employees. So let's hear from you. What do you think? Why doesn't it work? So type in your responses and we'll see what some of you are thinking. So I'm seeing things like people don't do it. It demotivates people. Employees have little input. What are some other thoughts you may have? Not linked to goals, expectations not clear, too subjective. People are not honest with each other. Absolutely. So I see that some of you are probably experiencing a lot of the things that I saw and still continue to see. We all know the annual or the drill, the annual appraisal. Even by the name itself, it implies it's only once a year, maybe twice a year. I had to pull teeth to get people to do a mid-year appraisal when I was doing this, just to do it twice a year. So once or twice a year, the manager sits down with the employee to review their performance. It may be paper-based, it may be online. We give ratings based on past performance that can't now be changed. And I don't mean the ratings, I mean the performance. We can't change the performance now. The employee has largely been told what to do and how they performed. So from that, many employees don't take their assessment seriously, at least that's what I observed, or their bosses for that matter. More and more research has been published in recent years supporting what I was observing. I just want to review a few of these with you. The Conference Board Review says to get results, stop measuring them. We need to coach to develop the right behaviors and competencies. Bloomberg Business quotes, there's no evidence that performance reviews improve productivity. And Forbes magazine recently published an article about their research into over 100 companies who want to or have radically changed their performance appraisal process. It also recommended, the Forbes article, that we need they recommended a process that is feedback-rich, meaning from all employees, not just from leadership. They recommended that we separate performance from development conversations, that we assume that employee knows something about their performance. Wow, what a concept. That we create an open and positive environment to share these things. And finally, to develop managers to be better leaders and coaches. Wow, listening to all of that, it sure describes a coaching culture to me. So let's go back to the annual engagement survey. That was the other thing that I did. You know, it was the same story every year when we looked at the individual drivers of job satisfaction. Managers tended to come out pretty high every year. So they were obviously key to employees' job satisfaction. But when we looked at, did employees feel, were they making a difference? Did they feel they had development opportunities? This tended to be consistently low. So how did this all come together for me? Well, while all this was going on, I was also getting certified as an executive coach, learning about coaching, and I suddenly had one of those epiphany moments that coaching seemed to be the common thread we were missing. To support what I intuitively knew, there's growing science behind the benefits of coaching. I'm sure a lot of you have read a lot of the neuroscience that's out there, and I just want to share a little bit of it today. Brain researchers are now calling this the decade of the mind, where we're at right now. Recent research in neuroscience has shown to better engage employees in their work, to increase employee accountability and responsibility, to build the capability of employees to deliver better results, and to create more positive, constructive behaviors. So looking at some of the examples I have up here, as we learn something new, we're creating neural pathways in our brain. So the ability that our brain can change is called neuroplasticity. The more we use that pathway, the more we develop the behavior. And coaching positive behavior change is one of the best ways to facilitate this change. The second example is many of us compartmentalize our lives. We separate our work from our personal, our emotional from our rational. And this can leave us walking around not really knowing who we are sometimes and what we want. And coaching helps us integrate these things in ourselves, making us more effective. And finally, the third example is our brains, and I'm sure you've heard this before, our brains are programmed for fight or flight when we experience stress. And this is our basic reptilian brain in the limbic system, the earliest part of our brain to develop. Today, our stress comes in the form of learning something new or having a performance review rather than fighting off saber-toothed tigers, but our brain reacts the same way. It doesn't know the difference. So when the limbic system is activated, we literally cannot think clearly as the fight or flight response kicks in. So coaching helps calm that down and allows people to see choices and new perspectives. So personally, I think this is really cool stuff, and it also just supported even more scientifically why we need to coach. All right, so where to start? Much of these first two are a refresher in change management best practices, so I'm just going to touch on them briefly, but I want to share specifically what I saw making a difference. So let's start with communication. As we all know, when introducing significant changes into our companies, the more communication, the better. So here's what I observed that made a positive difference. If communication is approached in a multifaceted way, it really made a difference for people accepting the change that was coming. So for example, the HR team began communicating about the coaching training program and its benefits months ahead of the launch. The CEO mentioned it frequently in monthly newsletters, both prior and during the rollout of the program, and started reiterating the many benefits to both individuals and the company as a whole. Finally, information sessions were held, both in person and virtually for those that weren't office-based, for all employees to get a preview of the program, to help them understand the wider expectations around why it was being launched, and also it created a forum where they could ask questions and give their input into the program itself. The entire executive team supported this in both words and actions, and here's what that looked like. So let's move on to the second essential. You know, to simply say leadership needs to be committed to the process is pretty obvious. The program was fully supported and led by the entire executive team. They made a strategic decision to fully participate in the program before anybody else. And then they participated in every subsequent workshop. They kicked it off, and they were coached in front of all the participants. They recognized that the significant investment was important to demonstrate their commitment, and that they walked the talk and tackled their own development at the same time, which was pretty unique. They also articulated a clear alignment with the company's vision. And in this case, it was, and I'm sharing the last company that I worked with, their vision was fostering an agile organization, enabling an individual initiative, and also leadership and accountability. So all of these things the coaching program supported. Finally, they made the program mandatory for all people leaders, and this is so important in my perspective. I mean, so many times when I'm working with an organization, they'll say to me, well, let's just put those managers through the training program who need it. Well, that may sound good, and it may be a good way to save a few training dollars, but in the end, you know, you might think you're saving money, but I really believe that you won't see these skills continue very long when these people come out of their program and they don't see a broader uptake by their peers, or particularly they don't see their managers using the same coaching skills. So, well, if everyone else isn't, why should I? All right, let's move on to the next one, and this is the cultivate. This is really the core of the training program. So I want to share with you some of the things that I think are really critical to be part of a coaching training program. Both its philosophy and the skills people need to learn and incorporate into their leadership practices to truly cultivate a shift to a coaching culture. I want to look at the importance of the coaching relationship, which necessitates a fundamental shift in the way many leaders think, and the critical coaching skills and process that I'm going to refer to as the coaching fundamentals. So there are a number of key factors that combine to create a coaching relationship. Much of this can be quite a shift for managers who tend to be more authoritative or feel they've been successful telling people what to do, and those that tend to micromanage, whether they admit it or not. Well, here's what I believe to be the foundation mindset for a coach. As a coach, I need to believe that people are capable and competent, that they are full of potential and possibility, and that they want to contribute and do their best to make a difference. The most powerful shift that a coaching leader can make is changing the way they think about people. We need to stop focusing on what is lacking, and we need to begin focusing on capability. I'm sure that many of you have heard the work of Albert Bandura working with sports teams, where teams were brought in after they played a game to watch a replay, and they were shown what they did wrong, and then they were told to go out and, you know, do it right. Well, what do you think happened? They went out and they did more of what they did wrong. You know, there's overflowing research in books, periodicals, journals, all the time that is describing the importance of coaching for strengths, not weaknesses. So, let's hear from you. I want you to think of a time when you had to work with someone who you didn't think was capable. How did you react in that situation? So type your answers in the question box, and let's hear from a few people. So some of the examples: I didn't delegate much to them. They seemed to perform exactly as I expected. I couldn't see beyond that. I never challenged them and watched them closely. What are some other thoughts you guys have? Did their work for them? Absolutely. Frustrated. Giving a lot of details. Reaction was negative. Or sorry, reaction was, I think you meant negative. I expected failure. Yeah, and we get what we expect, don't we? Asked a lot of questions, gave safe work, right? Nothing too important, too critical. Provide options, work around them. Okay, exactly. So let's compare this with the work of Hancock's, Hunter, and Boudreau in their book, Coaching for Engagement. They did an interesting study to see what happened when leaders thought their people were incapable, and they came up with the top 10 results. And a lot of this is what we've all just said here today already. So just picking out a few, the things that I really observed with managers that did this a lot. You know, they had low expectations for people. They acted with impatience. They criticized more frequently. A lot of you have said this already in your answers. So, you know, we're kind of in line with what you expect. If you expect people are incapable, you're going to get that. You know, so we clearly need the mindset that people are competent and capable. And that sounds simple, but for many it really isn't easy. So I spend a lot of time helping managers reorient their perspective. Now, in fairness, you might be thinking, well, you know, sometimes people really aren't capable. And that's true, right? They're new, they're learning a new skill, they're right at the beginning of something new. It's going to take them time to get up to speed. So in the program that we deliver, we discuss the difference between when it's appropriate to coach and when it's not appropriate to coach. So in the case of somebody learning a new skill, it's hard to coach them, for them to come up with their own answers when they don't really know what they're doing yet. So clearly there are times when that happens. But most of the time it's not the case. So Whoops, hold on, I went ahead just a little too quickly. So now we're going to go into sharing some of the coaching fundamentals or the coaching competencies that we need to have. All right, so these are the 4 coaching fundamentals that I want to talk about today. Powerful questioning and listening, generating positivity and confidence, and then finally having a solid coaching process or model are really critical to any successful coaching practice. These are the skills that all managers or anyone designated to coach another individual need to learn, and they need to use them as a part of the way they communicate and interact, not just once in a while when I book a coaching session. This way it becomes part of the culture and not just something I do from time to time. So I want to focus in on powerful questioning and listening today and get your input. So first of all, powerful questioning describes the type of questions that cause people to think. It helps them resolve their issues rather than getting you the information that you need to solve it for them. So let's do a quick poll. How many of you believe you're good problem solvers? Yes or no? Okay, so we've got about a 50-50 split. A lot of people think they're good problem solvers, etc. I mean, we are natural problem solvers. We want to help people with their problems. It's just human nature. Did you know that our brain gives us feel-good chemical rewards like dopamine when we solve a problem? So it's kind of hard not to. We're fighting against our makeup. Plus, we're busy ourselves. It seems easier and quicker just to give the answer to people. But clearly, it's a short-term solution. I like to use the leaky boat analogy. Solving other people's problems is like plugging the hole in the boat. It's a short-term solution. It doesn't solve working towards the bigger problem of building competency and capability, or in the case of the boat, looking at a solution that would prevent this from happening again. But sometimes we do need to tend to the emergency at hand and plug that boat. Now, when it's not an emergency, though, the challenge is not allowing yourself to solve someone else's problem when it's been a habit that most of us have had our entire work lives. A key exercise that we introduce in the workshop is an advice-giving exercise. Or, as you can see in the top left-hand corner, it's beginning to ask more and tell less. So I wanted to walk you through this, and I encourage you to try it the next time you have an opportunity and see how it works for you. So first, I want you to start to pay attention to the advice you give and get. Then, notice how you are driven to come up with solutions and how you hurry to resolve those issues for other people. And just as you notice that you're about to give advice, I want you to try and stop and ask these 3 questions instead. How important is this to you? What have you tried so far? And how else might you approach this? Once you do that, I want you to notice what difference it made to ask those questions. Now, if you've been the problem solver, you've been the go-to person to help people, it's likely that you're going to get some pushback at first. After all, they know that they can come to you and get a quick answer. But I trust that if you do this repeatedly, it becomes a new practice for you. You're going to see that people will start to come up with their own answers first. It's going to help you create awareness and responsibility with the person as they come up with their own ideas to solve the issue instead of always coming to you first. So think about it this way. You deny their awareness by telling them what you see, and you deny their responsibility by telling them what to do. We also need to ask ourselves, what do we truly want? Do we want compliance or do we want commitment? If we just want people to run around and do what they're told, we're going to get compliance. We just tell them what to do. But if we really want commitment and ownership in what people are doing, we need to ask, get their ideas. So think about that. Are you still listening? All right, well, let's talk about this important coaching skill. How many of you have ever checked your email while talking to an employee or a colleague? I'll bet most of you would answer yes. I know I would have to say yes. How many of you have done that in person when they're actually in front of you? So I'm sure we all could agree that to truly listen, we need to focus all our attention on the person and what they're saying. And often, more importantly, we need to listen beyond the words we're hearing. When you're coaching someone, you need to listen for their strengths, for their talents, for their greatness, especially when you can't see it. We need to listen for the context around what they're saying. What are their beliefs and thoughts behind the words they're using? And as I've got on the screen here, what are their values and commitments, rather than just the description that you're hearing? So let's see if you can do this. I'm going to read a few statements. We're going to pretend that this is somebody that has just walked up to us and they're complaining to us, okay? And I want you to listen powerfully and tell me, what are the values that you're hearing from that person? What is the commitment that you're hearing? So let's do the first, you two more. So, are we hearing a value or commitment here? Here's your first complaint. We always waste so much time in meetings. So can you hear a commitment to more effective meetings? Or that the person maybe values better communication or greater efficiency? Okay? So now let's see if you can do this. I'm going to type a second one in here, and I want you to type your answers in the question box, and we'll see what you think. You've rebooked our appointment 3 times this week. What is the value or the commitment that you're hearing? I'm just going to watch for some of the answers. Okay, value efficiency in their work. Commitment. Can you also hear that they're valuing, whoops, here we are, sorry, I just lost my place, valuing collaboration. You know, I'm sure that you've heard, if you've been doing any sort of coaching, that people want to be seen, heard, and understood. And if someone's getting their meetings booked rebooked all the time, clearly that's not happening. So we need to, listen for those things. Let's try one more. They didn't even notice the level of detail I captured in the report. What's the value or commitment you're hearing from that person? Attention to detail and hard work. Absolutely. How about a commitment to quality, thoroughness? Okay? Value recognition, need for recognition. Acknowledgement of work. Absolutely. So you get the idea. And when you start to listen beyond just those words, we stop hearing the complainer and we start to hear the person and what's important to them. And it's a whole shift in perspective. So good job. Thank you for participating there. Overall, we want to listen for something beyond the words, not only listen to what the person is saying. Sounds basic, but I tell you, it's hard. All right, let's look at the next 2 fundamentals briefly. And the next one is generating positivity and confidence. This is really tied back to the coaching relationship I talked about a few minutes ago. Holding people as capable, hearing their values and commitments when we listen, and then acknowledging those things back clearly and specifically. To thrive and grow, we need more positive feedback than negative feedback. And a lot of research, you might have read this, shows that a 3-to-1 ratio is optimal. So 3 positive to 1, I hate the word negative, but perhaps constructive feedback is really important. And this isn't just every time you give feedback we should say 3 positive things and 1 negative thing. It's really an overall situation. If you have an employee that at the end of the year feels that all the time they only ever heard negative feedback instead of something positive, we need to think more about more positive feedback than negative. Again, straightforward, common sense, but a lot of managers don't do it. Finally, it's great to have all these skills, to be able to listen and question powerfully and to generate positivity with positive feedback, but we also need a coaching model to make it an actual process, or we're just having a really good conversation. So I use the GROW model in a lot of the coach training that I do in business, because when you're teaching business leaders to use coaching skills, the language fits well into the business world and it's simple and easy to use. But the point here is not to promote the GROW model, it's just to say pick a model that works, that is simple, that people can understand the process easily. Okay, so I'm not going to spend much more time on those. If you do have more questions on this, there should be a bit of time at the end, and also we're going to give you some contact information to ask further questions after the fact. But I want to move on to the last part, and that is, how do we sustain all of this great work? So the first thing that I want to do is describe what's important to make sure it's not just an event. And then I want to wrap up by sharing how we measured, whether we received a return on our expectations when we run this program. So let's talk about the event. I'm sure that we've all been to a really great training event. We've walked away pumped, it was terrific, and then within a week or two the binder's sitting on the shelf collecting dust and we forgot everything we just learned. So the key is really ensuring that it's not an event. And this refers to two main points. The first one is that the training program to teach coaching cannot be a one-time event. And also that the coaching itself can't be seen as an event, like the once or twice per year performance review. So it's critical that we develop ways to ensure that the learning continues to transfer to the workplace long after the initial coach training. You want to build in follow-up, build in smaller group calls or meetings that continue to coach participants in their skill development. What I suggest is booking some smaller group calls once a month, 4 or 5 months, right after the training, and focus on one skill at a time in between each call or in between each meeting. And then at those meetings, discuss people's successes, discuss the challenges that they've had using those skills, and share that amongst the group, because people learn in just sharing and listening to other people as well. I also recommend that you provide some easy-to-use tools that the leaders can take away, such as a quick reference guide for the coaching skills that they can keep handy and use as they're learning. Also, perhaps a list of great coaching questions around the coaching model that you're using that people can then continue to build on and pick their favorite coaching or add their favorite coaching questions to as they do this. One of the things that we say at the end of our coaching program is that we want you to think about this like I'm your personal trainer and we've just begun a 4 to 6 month journey together to improve your skills. And it sets the foundation that this isn't just about today, the training program, it's about how are we going to keep helping support you to use these and learn to use them as part of your everyday being. Finally, the last of the 6 essentials. We need to put some sort of measurement in place to see how you're doing, but also to look at how can we continually improve the process. So one of the things that we've done is after participation in the program, we want to find out, has there been behavior change? Has there been behavior change on the people who are learning the new skills and also on the people that they're coaching? So I recommend doing a pre and post training survey of both the coaches and of those being coached. And this way, you're going to get self-assessed feedback of the coach, maybe where they thought their strength was at the beginning and then where they thought it was at the end. And, I trust that if you've done this well, you're going to see a jump. And also feedback from those directly experiencing the coaching or the change in the person coaching them, so that they can comment both on, the competency of the coach that they had, but also how did it impact their own behavior. And we all know that positive behavior change leads to a positive bottom line, which is really what this is all about. So I want to share the next 2 slides, which are going to show you some of the results, the impact that we had from the programs that we ran. But I want to show you this more just to give you an idea of how effective it was, but also to give you an idea of some of the things that you can ask. Now, we're recording this webinar, so I'm only going to go through a couple things here. If you want to go back and look at these statistics more later, you can go in and review them on the recorded webinar. So in the first one here, coachees, the people being coached, were asked to assess their manager's coaching effectiveness. So did they think they were a good coach or a bad coach? And it was clear that those who embraced the new way of being were considered good coaches and they had more positive results. So you can see a couple there, 80% who considered, or 89% who considered their manager were a good coach, were more aligned to organizational priorities than only 76 with a bad coach, and then so on. And you can see that the numbers were clearly higher when they saw it was a good coach. So as I said, I don't want to read through all these now. If you're interested, you can look them up later from the recorded webinar. The study also showed that good coaching is correlated to higher levels of job satisfaction, and job satisfaction means retention. So from the coach's perspective, we also did pre and post survey, and again, I don't want to read all these to you, you can look them up later, but there was definitely an increase in reported behavior change at the end of the program. What might be more important is sharing some of the anecdotal evidence that I saw and heard. And these were things that were many people said, I'm having quality conversations with my boss and employee for the very first time. That they're coming to me with solutions now, not only complaints. I also heard that people who only ever booked the annual performance review now had more frequent check-ins. And these weren't to micromanage, but they were to coach and to talk to their groups about development. So in summary, I shared with you what specifically took me on this journey and led me to where I am today, which is a true believer in the power of coaching. I also touched on some of the recent neuroscience, and that's just such a tiny fraction. There's so much out there that you can look up that really supports this work, and shared the impact that we've seen both during and after implementing a program such as this. I also walked you through here what I believe are the 6 essentials critical to growing a true coaching culture in your organization. So I hope wherever you are at in your journey with this in your organization that you've garnered at least one nugget that you can take away today to begin or continue working to transform your own culture. So let's go back to that question that I asked you at the very beginning. Your leaders have successfully embraced coaching skills. Now that you've had more information to consider, what are some of your thoughts? What are the positive impact that you're now seeing of planting, cultivating, and sustaining a coaching culture in your organization? So if you can take a moment and just give us some of your feedback, please. And for those of you that have said that you already have a culture going, I'd love to hear some of the results that you're seeing as well. So again, I'm seeing manager having more conversation, employees are more engaged, taking on more accountability, increased employee engagement, improved efficiency, more dedicated, higher levels of trust, empowered employees, higher ROI, absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attention today. We do have some time for some questions, and as well, if you'd prefer, my contact information is here as well. You can email me, and our website is there. The website address is there as well if you want to look up more information about this program and some of the other leadership development programs that we offer. As well, when we're getting close to the end of the time today, we're going to ask you to just complete a really short multiple choice survey on your thoughts today. So happy coaching, and let's watch and see if there's a few questions. And there's always a bit of a delay before when you start typing to what I see, so I'm just going to wait a few moments here and see if anyone has any. Can this program be scheduled in-house and somewhat customized? Absolutely. Absolutely it can. In fact, when the last one that I did was customized quite a bit to the environment of that organization. The essential core skills would probably be the same, but yeah, absolutely. So that's something that if you're more interested, or if you're interested in that, shoot us an email and we can talk to you more about that. Any other thoughts? Anything that you want to share that resonated for you or that didn't resonate for you, or something that we're suggesting? I'd love to hear, what have you tried? What's worked for you? Thank you, Kathy. Do you know of any situations where coaching results were not as expected? I'm assuming that means where the coaching results did not turn out positively. The one thing that I did observe, let's face it, there are some, you can launch something like this, and just like any new change initiative, there are going to be a certain percentage of people that don't get on board right away. And, we saw that reflected in some of the results where people really, and it was a real small amount in some cases where some of the leaders just didn't want to change. They didn't want to give up their telling people what to do kind of thing. And in the end, they weren't seen as a good coach. So that could have been some of the, reflected in some of the feedback where people thought their coaches weren't great. I like to see that the more people that got on board with this, as we know it does, it sort of influences others to, change their behavior. So even for those that it wasn't as positive as others, most people that I saw, had more frequent meetings, had more conversations with people, and really tried to get people to be more accountable and take more ownership, even the ones that, didn't embrace it as much as the others. So good question, thank you. Coaching is essential to quality leadership. How do we inspire others to tackle this important concept? Going back to what I said at the beginning, one of the things that really inspired leaders to do this was watching their leaders take it on. And that's why I spent a lot of time at the beginning, saying why it's so important to have senior leadership do this. I can't tell you how many times that doesn't happen. I'm sure a lot of you know that, where they think, well, no, we'll just get everybody else. But that really made a difference. It really showed that this was going to be across the organization. So that's one of the things I really recommend is, have the leadership walk the talk, and then other people are much more inspired to do this. The other thing we did is, we've shared a lot more of the neuroscience with people, because sometimes, not only is it just interesting, but it really shows that it's making a difference. It's scientifically proven to make a difference. It's not just something we're saying works. Does not have to be too complicated. Simple approach with some skill development can have a huge impact. Absolutely. I mean, all of these skills that I'm talking about, none of these are rocket science. They're basic communication skills, but I really believe they're taken to a higher level. And they take practice and they take refreshment. A lot of people came to this saying, well, I'm really good at communication, but nobody walked out of there without saying it was a good refresher and getting their awareness heightened. I would hope for increased engagement. Absolutely. Okay, some thank yous. Thank you. Just reading through some of the answers. Kathy's shared, what has worked for me is planning feedback sessions in advance, letting the employees know they are important by meeting with them monthly, listening to some of their phone calls. Absolutely. Speaking with them one-on-one. I always recommend letting people know in advance what's going on, what's planned. Not everybody can, on the spot come up with these things. A lot of people prefer to think about it in advance, so excellent suggestion. I like that, Laura. I hadn't noticed before today that I have a habit of praising subpar work. Isn't that interesting? Sometimes we think, well, we have to give acknowledgement to everything. And that's not a bad thing, but maybe it says that our expectations need to be a little bit higher. Or that, yeah, exactly, that maybe we're viewing people as not as capable. So glad you had that insight. Excellent. Okay, thank you for the feedback. Is there a difference between coaching, mentoring, or technical assistance? Great question. In fact, one of the modules that we do in the program is we talk about the difference between the different hats that a manager wears, because we really want to understand. I didn't specifically talk about this today. What is the difference between coaching, management, mentorship, training, all of those things? And I really do see a difference. The type of coaching that I'm promoting here, if you haven't gathered already, is really about questioning the person in front of you to come up with their own ideas, their own answers, etc. So when we're mentoring somebody or we're giving them technical assistance, we're basically walking them through something. We're telling them how to do something. We're sharing our expertise so that they can learn something new from that. As opposed to coaching is we're saying they're capable and competent, they have this expertise themselves, and we just need to help them think through coming up with it. So that's why, there is a real difference between these things. And sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but I hope that gave you an example. So all of these things are important. Oh, I know what it was. It was when I was saying earlier about sometimes we can't coach people. If somebody, a simple example, if somebody is learning Excel for the very first time, we can't coach them and say, well, what do you think you should do for that formula, when they have no idea how to even create a formula yet. So it doesn't work. In that case, we're going to mentor. We're going to provide some training. We're going to give them the answers or show them where to find the answers. And it's a different way of looking at things. So thanks for that question, Anna. Great question. Some people are really resistant to change and don't take coaching. Absolutely. How much time do you spend with that person before taking another course of action? I have to say, I personally haven't experienced this to a real extreme degree. And most of the people at least tried things, and when they started to see more results, when they started to enjoy better conversations with their people, they at least tried. Now, what I saw more was not so much people resisting, but maybe not jumping in as wholeheartedly as others. And then, that's when it's important to probably run, keeping it alive. Part of the making it not an event is continue to work with these coaches. One of the things when we did the follow-up, we did 4 follow-up small group calls. So let's say there was 12 people in the initial training, then we would divide them into 2 groups of 6, and then it would be a smaller group. And I heard repeatedly people say, oh, I just didn't want to come to these calls, I had other things to do, but it was really a good use of my time, and it really got me re-motivated. So that is the one thing that I recommend, is that make it mandatory. It's part of the program. It's not just one day and then the calls are optional. This is part of the whole learning, that you have to come to these follow-up. The other thing that we did, and I was fortunate in that because I'm a certified coach, I also offered one-on-one coaching as a support to all of the people going through the program. So if you are certified as a coach and you're running one of these, it'll make a huge difference if you can also do the one-on-one in addition to the smaller group calls. If you're not, if you're hiring someone to do this, then I recommend that that be part of the support. So then you've got it multifaceted. They've got the initial training, they've got the support tools, they have the follow-up coaching that continues for a few months, and you have one-on-one that can support them. So it sounds like a lot, but if you really want to make a difference, sometimes we need to do all of these things. What should we do when your team leader does not understand the coaching process and encourages you to be more aggressive in handling situations rather than get results? It's a tough one, Bernadette. I couldn't agree more. And the fact is, sometimes you have to make that call as a leader, that there are situations when you might need to be more. I talked about when it's an emergency. One of the things we talk about is the difference between is something critical or is it just important? And you can do different various forms of a SWOT type analysis to, sort of set that framework. But we do talk about, as a leader, you need to make a call, when it's important, when you can coach. And what I continually get is not so much that the team leader encourages it not to happen or to be more aggressive. It's more that the people who are supposed to be doing the coaching say, well, it's too urgent, or I just haven't got the time when I'm too busy. It takes too much time to do this, is what I hear repeatedly. But as they start to do it more, they realize that it really isn't taking more time, that it's becoming part of the way they do things. And maybe it's that small pain for long-term gain. It might take an extra 10 minutes right now in me asking a couple questions, but in the end you're going to have less and less questions. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question directly. If there's pressure from above because they don't understand the process, then that's why we really need to educate everybody on the process. Hopefully that answered your question. If not, please feel free to email me. If we have a good coaching culture, do we still need an annual performance review? That is an awesome question. I'll tell you what I personally believe, and I personally believe that from what I've read, we could get rid of performance reviews if it's a good, solid coaching culture, and it would make a bigger difference than performance reviews. How many organizations are doing this, I don't know, but I do know that there is software out there that is online coaching. There's all kinds of options that some organizations are starting to embrace. And I think it can make a difference. And I think we're kind of on that cusp of starting to realize that we need to do something new. And I'm encouraged to see that a lot of organizations are starting to try something new. So I think we could get rid of that annual performance review if we have enough around that coaching culture. I mean, people still need to challenge themselves and improve performance, but I think we see more effective results from a coaching culture. That's my personal opinion. Catherine, how does this coordinate with a performance management system, or would it be better to eliminate the performance management? Okay, so I kind of asked that. What I recommend, it's probably way too big of a change for people to just get rid of the performance management system and start coaching. But I see it as a process. I see that it took almost a year working with the last organization I was with for them to really start to see these results, of people to really embrace it. For all the managers, first of all, to get trained. And so that's step one. And then that needs to be, as I said, cultivated and sustained for probably a significant period of time. And then incorporated into the performance management process. And then, then there's a whole mindset shift between goal achievement and skill development. One of the things that I didn't mention, but I also saw as a real issue with performance management, is we only reward when a goal is actually attained, not the skill or the competency that we're seeing demonstrated to try and achieve that goal. So somebody might have great skill and great competency in achieving results, but they didn't quite meet their target. And I see this particularly with sales groups. And so they get a not, whatever the measurement system is, but unsatisfactory, or whatever it is, because they didn't quite meet their goal, and yet they're demonstrating all the skills. And I think that's where we need to really bring that coaching culture as part of it, to identify and encourage and really reward the skills that we're seeing. You can tell I'm real adamant about this. Love the questions. I know I tend to want to solve problems. Absolutely. What do you do when you have a boss who does not see your potential but always believe you're incapable of performing any task? Yeah, kind of the reverse scenario, right? It's a tough one, because here we're teaching leaders to see people as more capable, and if it's your boss, how can you be the one to do that? So send them to my course. It is a tough one. I think, maybe that's something as an aside. If you want to email me about that, we can talk about ways to sort of present yourself with your boss to show. Think of ways. What can you do to show that you're capable? What are some things you do that you can do to prove it, that maybe you're not doing? Maybe that's a question that I'll turn back on you. Okay, we're almost at the end of the hour. Thank you so much for all of your questions. Lauren, are we going to put up a short survey? Okay. Okay, terrific. So the short survey is going to come up after. It's really quick. Please give us your feedback today. And again, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a great rest of your day, or whatever time it is where you're calling from. Thank you.